Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me once again. Everything has changed in the last 24 hours. Donald Trump declares a national emergency and allocates $8.4 billion to build his border wall. Now, this all comes after he signed into law a bill that reopened the government and gave him an additional $1.4 billion to build fencing. Now, Donald Trump came out a few days ago and he said that we need transparency for this bill and we need people going through it looking for landmines. Well, they definitely found them. What hasn't been reported on in the media is that the Democrats tried hamstringing him when they gave him this $1.4 billion by including provisions in this bill that would have made it impossible for him to do what he wanted to do to begin with. They may have given him the money, but they hamstringed him by allowing local governments and local jurisdictions to have the final say as to whether or not a border wall got built on their jurisdictional property. So Donald Trump had no other choice but to sign a national emergency in order to make things happen the way that he wants them to. Now, what he did was genius because he managed to make Chuck and Nancy look like complete fools. They told him that they weren't going to give him but $1 to build this wall, and he acquired 1.4 billion% more than the Democrats told them was possible. Now, we have to open our eyes to the grand scheme of things here and realize Donald Trump did not have to declare this national emergency to build this wall. That $8.4 billion that he's allocating from the government by signing this national emergency was already available to him. He said straight up in that press conference that the money he's allocating from the budget of the military was already sitting there and ready to be used by generals at their own discretion. And he stated clearly when he met with some of these people that they all agreed the reasons Donald Trump needs the money are far more important than what they were planning on doing with it. So, if Donald Trump could have built this wall without signing the national emergency, then why did he sign the national emergency? Well, it's because there's far deeper implications to this whole thing than people are willing to admit to themselves. You have to realize that there's been a Red Dawn scenario breaking down in Mexico for a long time now that people haven't been paying attention to. China has military forces in Mexico, okay? They have bases in Mexico that most Americans are unaware of. There has been reports over the last 10 years of military exercises taking place damn close to our border by Mexican and Chinese forces training together, but it's not being reported on in the media. So by signing this national emergency and giving the contracts to build this wall to the Army Corps of Engineers, Donald Trump is allowing himself full jurisdiction to do whatever he wants when it comes to building this border wall. A lot of people are telling you that the majority of drugs come through the port of entries and that the primary use for this wall is not drugs. Well, I'm telling you right now, they are 100% right. Ask yourselves why Israel built the wall that they built. They built the wall that they built to quell illegal immigration and invasion. Okay? You have to realize illegal immigration in Israel isn't like illegal immigration here. When somebody illegally comes into the borders of Israel, it's usually to commit a terrorist act, okay? Because they've been at war for so long with the Palestinians, this becomes a huge problem. By putting up that border wall, they literally stop the inflow of people by 99.9%. What this does is prove unequivocally that a border wall works. But what this also does is prove Donald Trump is doing this for reasons that he's not making obvious. This also allows him to bring troops home at a faster pace because he can use the excuse, we need them here to provide security for those members of the service that are building this wall. Okay? This wall is far more than symbolic of keeping a campaign promise. This wall is far more important than anybody will ever admit to themselves, including myself. By building this wall, you set a precedent that shows the country things can and will be done that have to be done in order to keep you safe, okay? Now, we have to start looking at things from a different angle. By forcing the Democrats to give him this money, he weakens their position to a point that they've never really been in before. Donald Trump's approval rating right now is at 52% according to Rasmussen. Now, I'm not saying that his approval rating is 52% because they've over-aggregated for Donald Trump for a long time. They overestimated their results during the 2016 elections. So what I'm trying to tell you is his approval rating is probably hovering around 47, 48%, somewhere in that range. But what that means is the country is finally starting to realize he's doing things for the right reasons, okay? The speech that he gave for the State of the Union brought our country together, and people don't even realize that that was the first domino to go down this year, okay? That speech set everything into motion. That speech made people realize Donald Trump isn't as bad as the media is making him out to be. And what happened shortly after the State of the Union? Shortly after the State of the Union, CNN, MSNBC, all of them, they come out like clockwork and have to start admitting that the probes into Donald Trump's collusion through Mueller and the Senate and all of this have been nonsense. They are finally coming out and admitting that there is no evidence of Russian collusion. All while at the same time, Brennan is out there saying that collusion isn't criminal and blah, 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 and we're going to open up an investigation, and Donald Trump is guilty, etc., etc. Well, I'm sorry, when Democrats and Republicans are agreeing that they've found no evidence after 2 years of investigating him through Senate means, and man, these people have access to all kinds of records that you and I will never even imagine. You have to realize, man, Donald Trump is the most well-vetted president ever. Ever. And do you know why Donald Trump is letting this all go on? It's because it sets a precedent. Think about things here for a second. If you held everybody in our government to the same standard that you have held Donald Trump, how many people do you think would still be in office? Zero. Very, very few. There's very few people in our government that would have a job if you held them to the scrutiny that Donald Trump has been held to. Hell, look at General Flynn, look at all these people that have been charged with process crimes, okay? Donald Trump has allowed this investigation to go on because it opens the door for serious crimes to be prosecuted. Let's look at Roger Stone for a minute because this plays into everything as well. There is no coincidence that a national emergency is being signed in the middle of all of these process crimes being prosecuted. All of this is happening at the same time because it's all part of a plan. So, let's look at Roger Stone's history for a minute before we get into this. Roger Stone is a trickster. He has managed to play the Republicans, the Democrats, as well as the independents over and over and over again to get what he wants. And that is why he has the pull, the sway, and the swag that he does inside of Washington, D.C., inside of those social circles. Roger Stone is admired for that reason. Roger Stone has rules in which he lives by. One of those rules is do not voluntarily play a game that you know you can't win. So why would Roger Stone get involved with all of this WikiLeaks and all of this information and put himself in a position to go to jail for the rest of his life unless he thought he could win, unless he was in on something, okay? You have to realize he's known Donald Trump for a very long time. He's been his political advisor since the 80s. So to think for a minute that everything isn't tied together here is naive. So what happens with Roger Stone is he gets arrested. But not only does he get arrested, CNN is sitting at his house for an hour and a half prior to him getting arrested. What most people aren't realizing is prior to Roger Stone getting arrested, somebody leaked a draft of his unsealed indictment to CNN. So CNN shows up to his house 4 hours before his indictment was unsealed. So Roger Stone's lawyer files a lawsuit against CNN, basically wanting reparations because they should not have gotten this information in order to be at his house to film this. How did they get their hands on a sealed indictment 4 hours prior to it being unsealed? So when Stone's lawyer goes before the court, he brings forth evidence through metadata, right, that shows AW was the one that released this draft of Stone's indictment. It's Andrew Weissman, who has been the leaker inside of the DOJ for a while now. And this is fact because his name keeps popping up over and over again when you start looking at this evidence. And what does that tell you? That tells you that right from Jump Street, members of the DOJ and the FBI have been working against things coming to light for a long time. But this is where things get very interesting. By Roger Stone allowing himself to be wrapped up in all of this, and Corsi as well, they are allowed to bring forth discovery and evidence to exonerate themselves, right? Now, let's just say this opens up a huge can of worms for the Democrats, because what this does is, if Roger Stone has evidence showing that the DNC wasn't hacked by Russia, but was in fact infiltrated by an insider, it's going to blow the lid off the whole FISA-gate and collusion. It's going to blow the lid off of all of it. And this is the same exact reason you see General Flynn not changing this plea of guilty. Because what these people have done is they've inserted themselves into the grandest chess game ever, and they've positioned themselves on this board to a point where they're safe, okay? So think of Roger Stone as a bishop keeping the king in check. The king can't move out of his position right now, because if he does, Roger Stone can end the game by simply dropping all the evidence he has in discovery. And eventually this is what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be Roger Stone, or if it's going to be Corsi, or if it's going to be Flynn, but one of these guys is eventually going to drop information that is so detrimental to the prosecution that it's going to allow Donald Trump to drop a can of worms on the country, the likes of which has never been seen. And I know that this is happening behind the scenes right now, because you're starting to see people getting prosecuted for sedition and spy games, okay? There was a woman who worked for the National Security Advisors, okay? And basically she worked for Iran, but she defected, okay? She was supposed to be developing and gathering national security information from Iran to give to us, and she flipped and then disappeared to Iran, okay? Now she has officially been charged. And what this does is it shows the public and it shows the rest of the country that, hey, there are seditious people inside of our government. There are spies. And this woman is just the tip of the iceberg. Because you wouldn't bring charges on somebody that you can't prosecute for no reason if you're not trying to project a course of events that is about to happen, okay? Why would you ever bring charges on somebody who's living in Iran knowing that you're never going to get her extradited back to this country unless you're trying to set up a course of events that's coming in the future? So by showing that this woman infiltrated and gave this information to Iran, it clearly shows that we have elements inside of our government that are working for the wrong team. This ties right back into Roger Stone and Flynn and all of these other guys. So if this woman can be prosecuted for being seditious, if Roger Stone can be prosecuted for lying to Congress, if Flynn can be prosecuted for lying to Congress, we can draw this line of thinking out infinitely and realize that everybody who has ever stepped in front of Congress and lied recently is going to be held to account, okay? And more or less, we're using our own people as cannon fodder to allow this course of events to take place. And there are people who are so dedicated to this cause that they may be willing to fall on the sword to make this happen. Flynn and Stone being my two biggest thoughts as far as the players that may be willing to do this. So what we have to do is open our eyes to the grand scheme of things and the bigger picture here. This is all setting up to be a crazy, crazy spring and summer, my friends. If you think you've seen anything yet, you're sadly mistaken. You are sadly mistaken. The house of cards is crumbling right now, and Donald Trump just played a major move, and things are going to pick up. Right now, we're in the end game, okay? Donald Trump has been playing a game of chess against his opponent. Let's say they started with 45 minutes on their time clocks. Right now, they're down into the last 5. And if you've ever seen a professional chess game with two masters playing, when you get down to that last 5 minutes, they start making split-second decisions. And what that does is it leads to mistakes. And what mistakes lead to is a lost game. We're in a very dangerous position right now. We haven't seen Donald Trump make too many mistakes. If he does, it's all over. However, he has seen the Democrats make more mistakes than I can even bring into consciousness right now for me to speak. So the odds of Donald Trump screwing up first are a whole lot less, but it's still possible. I honestly think we're at the most dangerous point in this whole process right now, and it's all going to come down to whether or not the Supreme Court upholds Donald Trump's rights to declare this national emergency. We already have people on the border filing lawsuits because they're going to claim that there's personal injury being done because they're going to want their land confiscated in order to build this wall. And let's face it, the Ninth Circuit Court is definitely going to say Donald Trump is wrong. This is going to go before the Supreme Court, and this is where Gorsuch and Kavanaugh come into play. This is why the Supreme Court and the Senate were the key. This is why RGB getting sick and having problems is key. This is why everything ties together, my friends. I just wanted to bring this to your attention and make you guys realize that the game just picked up in pace. We're in overtime right now, and things are coming to a head. I just want to say thank you for bearing with me and putting up with the lack of videos, because I'm only going to come to you when I have something important to say. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Like, subscribe, become part of the community. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.